several years ago, quite a few years ago, going on towards 20, I read a article in the Sedona Journal of Emergence that now I've had a column for over 10 years. But back then I read a spiritual article by Robert Shapiro, and he was channeling a creator by the name of Zosh. And Zosh said, you can request benevolent outcomes in your life. So I said, that's interesting. I'd been trying all these other modalities. I'd tried, as an example, the law of attraction. It worked a little bit. Most of the time it didn't work. Didn't know why. I've tried all these other different modalities. And so I decided to just experiment. And so I started requesting benevolent outcomes for little things at first, just for my drive to the post office or a restaurant or the grocery store, whatever. And I built up immediate trust because I got this immediate feedback. And so I slowly but surely used it in more important things. And I found that where all of these other modalities would work and wouldn't work, lo and behold, this one worked perfectly. I'd never been able to say that about any other modality. And so I said, okay, this is fantastic. And so I started formulating a way to say it. And I would say, I request a most benevolent outcome for, and whatever it would be. And then eventually I started saying thank you. I didn't say thank you at first, but the more I could see this working so perfectly for me, I felt the need to say thank you. And in my beliefs, I believe that these requests go through your own guardian angel, who is also known as a golden light being, and they prefer the term servants of the Creator because they all volunteered for this job of looking out for us. And so even though, whoever you may pray to, it's sort of funneled back through your guardian angel who knows your whole soul contract. And so if you request something that is within the perimeters or within the boundaries of your soul contract, you'll get your wish. If it's something that's not good for you or is not benevolent for everyone connected with the request, then it won't happen. And so there have been things that have happened to me, like a friend of mine in Paris and I tried to raise money for a series of spy movies based on some books by an author by the name of Cheney in the UK. And they were World War II spy type stuff. And every time we would get close to raising the money, something really weird would happen and it would fall apart and we would not get the money to do the series of films. And finally, I asked Theo, my guardian angel, I said, why wasn't this happening? Because I've been requesting benevolent outcomes all the time. And he said, Tom, you would never reach the number of people that you're going to reach with your writing and speaking and all that you would if you went down the path of doing those movies. And so that's how it works. There's something better on the way. You just have to trust in it. If you request a benevolent outcome to get a certain job, you may or may not get it because maybe a better job is on the way. Or if you request a most benevolent outcome for the perfect job for you, maybe that perfect job, someone is in that position and they have to leave, or they have to leave for a pregnancy or for a better job or whatever it happens to be, and before you get that job. Or maybe you need an interim job and you have to you have to wait or go through an interim job for you that will set you up to be able to get that perfect job for you. So you just have to trust in the process. If you take nothing else away from what I'm telling you today, if you start experimenting with requesting benevolent outcomes in your life, it will serve you the rest of your life, and it will make it less stressful, less fearful, and more successful. So I guarantee it works. So anyway, these are the 3 Gentle Way books, Self-Help Guide for Those Who Believe in Angels. And in the first book, you say something different for when you want to request a benevolent outcome for other people, or your cats or dogs or whatever it happens to be, or people that have been affected by, say, a hurricane, for them to be safe. I put that on my Facebook screen just in the last day or so, to say a benevolent prayer. And that's what I call them now. In book 1, The Gentle Way 1, I called it living prayers, but I didn't like that. It didn't seem to sort of sync with requesting most benevolent outcomes. So I changed that. And also I was saying all these different ways to say prayers for other people. And I also was inspired to say, I ask any and all beings to blank, 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 thank you. And that's the way you, because supposedly there's a whole different set of angels that handle those prayers from anyone all over the world. And I asked Theo, I said, are they golden light beings too? And he said, no, they're younger souls, but he says they're eager. So that's the way he describes them. So that's how that started. And I started writing articles for the Sedona Journal, and they were extremely well received. I started having, they put it on their website, which at that time, years ago, was a little unusual. And so it just grew from there. And these days, I have a monthly column where I send them in stories that are sent to me from all over the world, from people requesting benevolent outcomes in their lives and these success stories. And so I send them these stories, and they'll choose a number of them to publish in their magazine according to the space. Now, if you want to see all the stories, I have a blog each Saturday, and it's called thegentlewaybook.com/blog. And I've been doing these blogs for years. And in fact, the Gentle Way 3, my publisher, who is Light Technology, that also publishes the Sedona Journal, they came to me and they said, Tom, we've got all these stories from you. We'd like to arrange them in chapters according to topics like hospital or work or travel or whatever. And so they did all this arranging of all these stories, and I wrote an opening and closing to the book. So that was one of the easiest books I've ever done. And so in that the Gentle Way 3, there's probably 300 or 400 stories of all types in there. So it gives you a great idea, great ideas. Now, again, you could go to the blog, and you could go from just one blog to the next backwards, and you can see all the different ways people use them. A lady, a French lady that lives in China, in my latest blog, was thanking everyone that had said benevolent prayers for her on the birth of her baby. And she had requested benevolent outcomes. She had a C-section in China, and she said she was already breastfeeding within just a few days for most of the moms that that had C-sections. So she was just so grateful that everything worked perfectly when she had her baby. So anyway, there's lots of great stories like that. People that have been saved from danger, whether it be one lady out in the Midwest of the United States, there was a tornado heading down on her house, and she requested a benevolent outcome, and the tornado lifted right over her house. And just so many stories of people avoiding all different types of dangers, assaults or whatever. So be sure to check that out. And I think, again, if you will start experimenting with it, you'll just be amazed at the results. It's 100 times better than the law of attraction. One of the ladies sent in to me, and she said, Tom, requesting the law of attraction is like driving a Ford Pinto, and requesting benevolent outcomes is like driving a Ferrari. Both will get you there, but the Ferrari gets you there a lot faster. So that's how great this works. I mentioned that I'm a telepath, and I know that sounds really strange, but keep in mind, we're all telepaths, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But if anyone has ever heard of the Ryan Institute at Duke University, back many years ago, they actually did experiments, what they called ESP experiments, where they would have someone on one side of the table and someone on the other side, and one person would be using the Zener cards, and they'd concentrate on a square or a circle or a triangle or whatever it happened to be, and they would try and send that to the other person. Now, they had very mixed results. Thank you. When they did these experiments, and I feel the reason because of this was that, number one, they did not allow the person or put the person into a little bit of an altered state, not complete deep hypnosis, but I'm talking about just like an alpha state, that state you're in when you're waking up from a dream, and you're in that in-between stage where you can remember your dreams. That's the kind of stage that works best. And the second thing, they needed to have people do these experiments that had a chance to work together. The best ones, I believe, would be twins, married couples, been together many, many years, that type of relationship. And I would love to see, and I don't know if this will ever happen or not, but I would love to see an experiment on the Mars mission where they would have a twin like they did for the International Space Station and another twin on Earth, and that it worked together to work on this telepathic pathway between them, and to test out receiving and all these, because I found that you can that there is a special energy path that is instantaneous, and it doesn't matter whether you're across the table from someone, across campus, across halfway around the world. It works instantly, or even across the universe. It works instantly. So, in other words, instead of having the problem that they portrayed in the Martian movie, if anyone saw that, where there was this 20-minute or more delay, they wouldn't have that problem because they would be able to instantly communicate and say, hey, we've got a problem, Houston, this is what it is. So that's what I would love to see as an experiment in the future. Now, the reason we're all telepaths, okay, because we all have the pineal, some people pronounce it, I'm not sure which, gland in the back of our heads, and that acts as an antenna. Now, scientists so far have only discovered that that the pineal gland secretes melatonin, but it has this other ability to act as an antenna. And so there we go. It's so we're all telepaths. And in my case, when I discovered by going to a seminar put on by Dick Sutphen, S-U-T-P-H-E-N, in Sedona, that I had the ability to be a telepath, then it simply took practice, as Theo kept telling me over and over and over again. And the way I got this practice was that I opened up my newsletters, which I thought I'll do one newsletter a month or something. And when people started asking me questions, then I wound up asking thousands of questions since 2005. And so that's how I got better at what I do. I'm still at only maybe 80 to 90% percentile, which means, 10 or 20% of the time I will not receive. And I'm told that's because of many different reasons. One, I could be very tired from working. Two, it could be the position of the planets. I know, like Robert Shapiro, who I mentioned earlier, will not do any channeling around, I don't know, full moon or new moon or something like that. But they've told me, Theo and the gang, as I call them, that I am to do these continually. They wanted me to not worry about any of this. That yes, I'll make some mistakes, but a lot of times I can go back and someone will ask me the question, and I'll forget that I've asked it in the past, and I'll ask it again, and I'll get a different answer, and so then I'll ask the question a third time to get the best answer I could possibly get for that particular question. So that's how the pineal gland, and of course, again, it's all types of telepathy. I mean, being a psychic, all these different things, knowing that suddenly you need to call Aunt Mary, there's something wrong. All of these are feeding into that pineal gland. So Theo, and by the way, people say, Tom, how do I find out the name of my guardian angel? And I tell them that Theo said that human beings do not have the ability to say angelic names. So he said, Tom, you could call me Tom, Dick, or Harry, but Tom might be a little hard in your meditations. So I thought for a couple of weeks, and suddenly the name Theo came out of thin air. I've since discovered in years past that I've done this a lot of lifetimes before, and I've called him Theo in many lifetimes. So that's sort of how that filtered into me. But you can say out loud, guardian angel, what name shall I call you? And you may get an immediate answer back of a name to call your guardian angel, or it may take a couple of weeks like it did me. Okay. Now, among the many beings that I've communicated with, I have communicated all the time. Every time I do a session, I also communicate with Gaia, who is the soul of the earth. And Gaia works with 4 million, and I may have this farther down in the presentation, sorry. Gaia works with 4 million other souls that help Gaia run the earth. So one time I asked Gaia, I said, are you sort of the same size as the other souls? And she said, and I look at her as a female, she said, Tom, she said, I'm actually the same size as all these other souls. Just look at me like I'm the conductor of the orchestra, which is a great way, I think, to imagine her. And so you have all of these other souls that are group souls, like we'll get into many of them, group souls for cats, and dogs, and so on. So more on that probably later. And as part of that, I will go back. One of the Theo one day introduced me to another member of my soul cluster. Okay, and I found out there's 8 fragments of our soul in a soul cluster having lives on Earth, and it turned out that this member of my soul cluster is having a life back on Nomo, which may be recognizable to some people. It's a water world in the Sirius B star system, and he's an amphibian. So I talk to Antura almost every session that I have also. For Atlantis and Lemuria, I started, one day I just had a question. I said, have I ever had a life on on Atlantis? And I was told, oh, yes, Tom. That's actually, it came about because I was wondering where the general way originated. Because when I first started talking to another member of my soul cluster, who's an Indian shaman living in the 1600s in the Western United States, he had told me that that I was practicing the gentle way back in the 1600s, because I was also an Indian shaman named Stillwater, and I decided to incarnate into the 20th and 21st centuries to reintroduce people to the gentle way. And so I kept wondering, well, how old is the gentle way? I know it's 300 years old. And so one day I asked Theo, and I said, how old is it? And he said, Tom, it dates all the way back to a life you had about 12,700 years ago in Atlantis. And actually, I've since learned that it was actually Poseidon. And so he said that you were inspired to create the gentle way. You had 1 million people that were your followers, and that you were told that they were going to destroy themselves because they were getting to closer and closer to a massive war with the island of Aran, which was 375 miles to the south of them, and it was and there are little 5 islands right below that, so that were all part, and they were the sons of Belial, and Poseidon believed in the law of one, it was called, and they were just getting to the point where they couldn't stand each other, and I was told that it was time to get out of Dodge. So I and 25,000 of my followers migrated through Spain all the way up to ancient Egypt, where we settled. And so I again, as I asked more and more questions about the days of Atlantis, I was able to go all the way back to the very start of Atlantis and Lemuria and go forward. And even farther back from that to the start of the human race on Earth. So it's tons of answers and questions and answers that I think you'll enjoy reading. Now, let's kind of get into the creator of creators. I went all the way back, and I actually asked, well, first of all, I found out there are billions of creators with billions of universes, and that our creator is considered one of the top 5 of all these billions of creators. So I wound up even communicating with Creator through Theo, because the energy of our Creator would be so strong that it would burn me up, and so the energy is dropped down, so I could. But I found out in asking all these questions that there is a creator of creators. There's actually this enormous being, I guess I would have to say, that has birthed all these billions of creators and is continuing to birth creators. So that's just amazing. You talk about a big mama. That's a big mama. So our universe is, I understand there are universes that are as small as the head of a pin, and there are universes that are as large or larger than ours. And that's, it's just amazing that with all these billions of creators, that our creator would would have something so unique. And one of the things I learned was that we are adjacent, our universe is adjacent to 3 other universes. And they're, so I started saying, well, how are they like bubbles? Well, not exactly. So I thought they'd be bubbles kind of stacked on top of each other. And then I started looking, well, since there's only 3 that are truly adjacent to us, I started thinking, well, maybe they're sort of like this shaped, but not exactly. And so I finally was told that it's sort of like our universe is sort of like in a diamond shape, where there are points of the diamond shape that touch other universes. Now, we can actually see one of the other 3 universes in the night sky, but we think that it's actually part of our universe. But scientists will one day have the equipment to see that there is a void in between these 2 universes. And they don't have the equipment yet to see this void, but they one day will learn that there is a void between these 2 universes. But if you look towards, I think it's towards the Sagittarius system is where the other universe is located. Now, we're in what's called the Earth experiment. One of the reasons that our creator is considered one of the top 5 creators is that our creator decided to see if there was any way that we could, that there'd be a way to work with 4 negative energies. All the rest of our universe and all the other universes in all these other universes, all work with only the 10 positive energies. But we have found a way to be successful in the 4 negative energies. And I just learned about this information probably within the last, I don't know, a year for sure, maybe 9 months or so. And that there are these energies. And our scientists will not be able to identify these energies for hundreds of years. So you're getting really far out information here that will not be proven for hundreds of years, that there are 4 negative energies and 10 positive energies. So that's, and I've had people, readers that have said, well, could it be this kind of energy, wind energy or whatever? No, it's just an energy. And so we'll just have to leave it at that. Now, for the Earth experiment, we were put in a space-time continuum to enclose this negative energy. So that's how that works. And so we have all these lives on Earth. Now, let's see. We typically will have 600 to 800 lives on average on Earth in order to experience all these energies and all these different things that the Earth can provide. And that's a really wide, I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly, because you have to balance all lives. You can't have all of your lives as a goody two-shoes or, as a gentle soul. You have to have lives where you act as the protagonist in order to help the other soul clusters that you work with learn and raise their vibrational levels. Because our whole goal as souls is to raise our vibrational levels to the point where eventually we will, and this has never been done in any other universe, we will eventually meld together as a creator, take over the running of this universe from our creator, and allow it to go to a higher level, which it doesn't even know what's at that higher level. So, and supposedly there's only maybe 1 or 2 other creators that have actually been able to do that. So we have all these lives. They typically will balance about 50-50, male, female, and they'll by the end of your 600 or 800 lives, they will balance as far as antagonist, protagonist kind of lives. So our souls were promised fast track raising of our vibrational levels, eventually meld together as a creator, never been done before in any universe. We take over running this universe, and we must be veiled to learn how to make decisions as a creator, which is why we're veiled. We can't, like all the other societies all over the universe, they can remember all their past lives. So basically they'll say, oh, well, let's see, 15 lives ago I had this little problem and I solved it this way. So they never try and find a new way to solve a problem. We, on the other hand, can't remember that we've had that problem in the past, and so we try, and eventually we find a different way to do it. So that we are sort of like almost the brain of the creator in a way, and I'm sure I'm describing it poorly, but that's we have to be the decision makers. So I mentioned before a soul cluster. Now, soul cluster, we're not all whole souls, okay? I used to think that we were little souls like Clarence, who in The Wonderful Life was trying to get the bell to ring for his angel wings, but we're not. We're soul fragments, and typically in a soul cluster there are 6 to 12 soul fragments of a soul. Now, our souls are so immensely beyond what we imagine that they can be having 500,000 to 1 million lives going on at the same time all over the universe, because as part of learning to eventually meld into a creator, we have to know all these other forms of life in the universe. So all these souls are having lives all over the universe. And so we have support. And the support, of course, is our golden light beings that I mentioned before, our guardian angels. And Theo once told me, he said, Tom, he said, when Creator sent out the description for this job, he said only golden light beings need to apply. He was being humorous. And so there are a little over 1 million golden light beings handling all of our lives on Earth going on at the same time, because time is an illusion in the space-time continuum, and all of the parallel lives, which I'll get into in a minute. So I mean, they do it for thousands of souls at the same time, and all the soul fragments in that soul, or as part of that soul. So they're whole souls, golden light beings, a little over 1 million, and they prefer the term servants of the Creator. Now, when my wife Dina and I went to Sedona a couple of years ago or so, I requested a benevolent outcome that I could see Theo in a photograph. And so for those of you that have been to Sedona, which I recommend, if you haven't been, you need to go. It is, what energy. We went to Oak Creek. This is Oak Creek right here. And this is right across from the cathedral vortex. And so I decided to do a meditation. And so my wife, Dina, took several photos. And in this photo, Theo showed up. And keep in mind, guardian angels have never had a physical life, okay? And so this was the best way he could show me. It's not like an orb for one of your guides, okay? It's just sort of like this ghostly form that he he gave me. And the photos before and after did not have this at all, and were taken from the very same spot. Now, speaking of our guides, we have also guides. We have one main guide that is typically one of the members of our soul cluster. And then we have guides that come and go depending on what the work we're doing. So as an example, when my wife and I had this international wholesale tour company, I had a couple of guides that helped me and her with this wholesale tour company. When we sold that company and we started this international film and TV program distribution company, we've had a couple of guides. My guides probably are more for the sales side. Hers are she's services all the contracts and accounting and all this stuff. So I'm sure she has her guides for that. And then when I started writing, I added a couple of writing guides. And so I asked Theo naturally, oh, any of them famous? You know, thinking I might have a famous novelist. No, Tom, you don't need that type of writing guide. They're extremely proficient in writing, and so that's what you need in this life. And then my mother, who is of course deceased, is my guide for all things feminine, because approximately 75 or 80%, it's dropped some as I've added more men as we've gone along, that subscribe to my newsletter are women, because you seem to be able to be more receptive to understanding. Okay. And they all have different colors and many of them different intricate designs. I learned, like, if you see a red orb in a photo, that's typically someone that's had 100 lives or more. If it's a blue orb, maybe they've had 200 lives or more. So someday I'm told that someone will study these photos and will decipher all these different orbs, what they are, what they mean. Now, before we began this talk, I mentioned there are 4 million group souls, and these group souls they don't ensoul like an animal with a whole soul, which we don't either. They'll ensoul all the different kinds. So as an example, there's a group soul that I've spoken to in my sessions that ensouls all the dogs of the world. Every dog in the world in all of their lives going on throughout time. Now for cats, we were before the program started, we'll say, we were talking about cats, and I've talked to Cat Soul, and Cat Soul is the group soul for only domesticated cats. And Cat Soul told me that they like to spread the work, so there are one or more other feline group souls for the other types of cats, whether it be tigers or lions or whatever. I haven't explored that any further, just only with the domestic cat group soul. But then I've spoken to cockroach soul of all things, and I've spoken with pine tree soul. Let's see, oak tree soul, and so there, for every living thing on earth, there is a group soul. And that's important because, some people say, oh, it's just a dog, they just dismissed it. And that really kind of irritates me, because these dogs and cats that are our friends, that are here to teach us you know, they're so loving, and and but all of these animals and birds and insects and all this living fauna on Earth, they all have group souls. So yes, you can go out and hug a tree, say good things to it. They feel it on some level. And I've talked to Rose Soul and I think Orchid Soul, and they're really interesting. So that's very important. If one thing you remember on this one is that there is a group soul for every single living thing on Earth. There are also parallel Earths on different frequencies. So there are 12 parallel Earths, and with the frequencies, the higher frequencies having easier lives, and the lower frequencies having harder lives. So the 12 are divided into fours. 1 to 4 is the lowest energy. 5 to 8, we're in timeline number 6. That's what they're called, or timelines. And we're in the middle frequency. And then the upper timelines have the easier lives. And and then they're subdivided into 2s. And what's interesting, timeline number 12 is non-physical. And I, you know, for a long time, I just kind of ignored it. You know, non-physical, what does that have to do? Well, the non-physical lives are considered the perfect lives, and all these other lives going on Earth are compared to the perfect life. So there is one, but I still kind of ignore it. and so you know, you have in requesting these benevolent outcomes, it keeps you on your soul path. So you come to a crossroads, and if you're requesting a benevolent outcome along, you'll be taking the high road. You won't go off the reservation, as Theo calls it. So keep that in mind. Request benevolent outcomes. I request most benevolent outcome 4. Thank you. So I'd love for you to sign up for my weekly free newsletter at www.thegentlewaybook.com. There's a little blue box on the homepage, and you can sign up on that box, and it's free. As I mentioned before, I have questions sent to me from all over the world. And I do have an author page on Facebook that you can follow, and I post constantly on that. So I think that's it. Yeah. So here we go. Questions.
Tom, I noticed that you went to a Christian university. How does your view of how has your view of Christianity developed or changed with all of your work?
Oh, okay. Let's start all the way back at the first when I was going to TCU. I was required, or we were required, to take at least 2 semesters, I think, of some type of Bible education or spiritual education, whatever. And so I was in a class taught by a professor, and it turned out that the things that he was saying about the history of Christianity and everything was completely different than what I was hearing from a preacher on Sundays. And so that got me very confused. So, but that goes on. It's all part of education and learning. And in all these questions, naturally, I've asked questions about all these religious figures, because I was told that my sole interest are religions of the world, and that I was allowed to have a life at the beginning of every single religion in the world. And so one of the things I've learned is that Jesus was the greatest human to ever walk the earth, but it wasn't because of what the church said. Oh, he's the Son of God, or okay, it wasn't because of that. It was because his soul fragment was 3 times as large as anyone else's on earth, and that includes um, uh, any other person that someone wants to follow. And that's why he was able to do all these amazing um, uh, healings and everything, was because his soul fragment was larger than anyone else's. And so that's how I look at Jesus. I will mention, since we're talking about lives, I have had lives at the start of all the major religions. As an example, I was a student of the man that created Hinduism almost 60,000 years ago. I was a student of the man who started yoga 200 or 300 years later. Shiva is the man's name. They call him a god because all this stuff turns into legends over thousands and thousands of years. I was one of Moses' sons. I was Salome, one of Jesus's female disciples, because he did have female disciples, and I was the mother of James and John, as near as I remember. And so all along, I was one of the 5 men that offered their head to the 10th guru of the Sikh religion, and it just goes on down. Muhammad, I was a friend of his. So I've been around for the start of all these religions, except for 2. And one of them is, and I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, somebody help me, Zoroastrianism?
Zoroastrianism.
Thank you. And Scientology. So that tells you that you have lives back in times, and you can even have overlapping lives, because as an example for Scientology, I will be Sarah Northrop, the second wife of L. Ron Hubbard, and will help him write Dianetics. So that's a life to come. So you can go back and forwards. My next life on Earth is going to be as a female space pilot of one of 17 Earth starships roaming the universe. Then I go back to 2600 to prepare people to go to travel to the stars, then back to 3400. So I thought I'd only have maybe 100 lives left, and I've got 300 more. Oh, that was a real shock. So anyway.
I think that's a shock for all of us.
Oh, yeah. That many.
We have humanity, but there you go.
And speaking of L. Ron Hubbard, the soul that will be him, it has been a friend of mine since grade school. He's a retired minister. In the next life, I'm supposed to be his mother, and it's called a setup life, so that we'll have a very loving relationship, very trusting, and then the next life after that, I'll be the wife. Now, my wife, Dina, in this life, in our past life together, she was the Egyptian princess that helped my band of 25,000 Atlanteans resettle, and in her next life, she's going to be a man, and and he'll be back at 100 years or so after that time period, and she will be a great leader. He will be a great leader for his people, and I will be his assistant. But I've already had that life. It's a past life for me, so it gets really strange.
I think our heads are just rolling at the moment. With
I'm sorry.
Have you thought of putting this into a film? Have you? I mean, is there a film in the works? Because I think you've got so much material here.
It may be. I don't know. That's a good question. I guess, just just before I closed off my first contact book, I mean, within a week or two before, I guess they figured I was never going to get it. And they finally told me that my family and I are supposed to shoot the first documentary ever filmed on board a mothership orbiting the Earth. And this is a 3-mile wide mothership with uh, 3 miles wide, 20 stories tall, 11 decks, 900 crew, and their families, because some of the crew lives their whole lives on board the ship, and they're from 37 different planets. So I've already been working on what I'll have in the first full-length documentary, second full-length documentary, third full-length documentary, and even the TV series. So that's kind of what I've worked on, but maybe this will come before that, or I don't know. Who knows?
Thank you, Tom. That was fascinating. You are a fountain of information, and we very much enjoyed that. Would want to learn more about what it is that you have found, because it helps to inform all of our perspectives on it. And so we look forward to hearing you again. Thank you.